Peter, I think Debbie's in the chat, so you can definitely chat with her in the chat feature. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our session on policing and security. I'm Joan Antunes. I'll be your host for this session. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to present your research. I'm really looking forward to it. And without further ado, and I don't want to mispronounce your name because I'm going to. Can you say it out loud so I can learn, please?
Yeah, you can call me Oguz.
Oguz?
Oguz, yeah.
Oguz. And then your partner in crime, Ismail?
Ismail.
Ismail? Perfect. Thanks. You have total control. Take it away. Just a reminder for the attendees, questions, you can put it in the Q&A, you can put it in the chat, and we will address them at the end. 10 minutes, and take it away.
Thank you, John. Thank you for everybody, and good morning. And for those participating from overseas, good afternoon to everybody. And today we are going to talk about one of our recent research on community cooperation with police in terror-related crimes in Turkey. And I did this study with my colleague Ismail from University of Scranton. I am a faculty at University of Sul Ross in the West, Texas. The purpose of the study, basically, there are twofold focus of this study. Twofold. The first one is to investigate whether the normative or instrumental model of police legitimization is more effective on people's willingness to cooperate with police in countering terror-related crimes, and to highlight the role of some demographic characteristics such as ethnic and religious views on cooperation. Basically, there are some studies highlighted the importance of which model works in which model of legitimacy works on cooperation with police, but usually those studies made in general crime. So one of the addition this study to the research is basically we are testing that models of legitimization on legitimacy on terror-related crimes. On the other hand, when we are talking about terror-related crimes and police cooperation, we see that a lot of studies, they are those studies made in usually in Western countries like European countries or United States or Australia. So this is the first example that we are testing that assumptions in a Muslim-dominated country. So what is legitimacy? Very briefly, basically all institution needs depends on legitimacy, especially when we are talking about police. It is very essential because police is the only legal monopoly that given authority to use violence. So they need to kind of get to be perceived as legit as possible because they need a kind of justification their actions. On the other hand, a growing body of research shown that the perceived legitimacy of police is particularly important for fostering public cooperation and encouraging cooperation with the police and enhancing police crime reporting activities, which is very important for terrorism-led policy, intelligence-led policing. If you think about that, I will not go in detail since our time is limited, but it is also very important to get support from the public, especially for getting countering terror-related crimes. There are basically two models of legitimacy. The first one is performance-based instrumental model, and this model basically depends on and favors coercive policing strategies. And basically this model answers the question what police do. Are they working effectively? Are they arresting people? Are they, how effective they are? On the other hand, there is a second model, procedural-based model, normative model. Basically, this model highlights or emphasizes on the fairness or procedural justice of the police. And I will say that this basic assumption answers the questions. Okay, police do that, but how are they doing that? Basically, are they fair? Are they treating everybody equally, or there's a fairness, or basically answering this question. So we tested these two models. These are the very common major models in legitimacy literature. Research context, we collected our data from Turkey, Istanbul. And Turkey, basically, we see when we are talking about legitimacy, we have to highlight the importance of power distance. Basically, it's a long tradition. Turkey is an example of long tradition of conventional reactive policing and alienation of public from policing practices. Usually, if there is a central government and central police system, and people powers are really limited. I will say even there is no chance to participate. Their only power is elections every 4 years, and if you are following the current situation in the Turkey, that chance is even under threat. Police officers perceive that their first priority is to serve the government rather than the citizen, and the police are always seen as the government agent, not a public servant. This is a traditional policing system in Turkey. Especially the current oppressive tendency in the government and the polarization of the society make this condition worse, because basically it is reviving the national security syndrome back, and also basically it is also emphasizing and reviving the sense of corresponding reconstruction of order maintenance policing strategy in Turkey, which means that it was very little that the people were asked about their opinions about police, and that chance is even fading away and disappearing. Data collection, we collected data from 1,800 random selected Istanbulians, basically living under the jurisdiction of Istanbul Police Department. And the data has been collected in the first part of 2012. And basically, we asked several questions. It's like an omnibus survey, and we basically made a factor analysis, and we basically decided our variables based on the factor analysis and factor loadings. The list of variables used in this model: cooperation with police in terror-related crimes, perceived, this is our dependent variable, and perceived police legitimacy, police performance in general crime, and also police performance in countering terrorism, fear of terrorism, social cohesion, local government and judicial performance, media exposure, support for terrorism, and also some religiosity, ethnic identity, and some other socio-demographic variables. This is our force model. In our force model, basically, we tested the impact of socio-demographic variables and also police performance on cooperation, people's perception of or supporting police in counter-terrorism activities. And as you can see, only among demographic variables, we get a significant relationship only with income. And it is basically, I will talk about it at the conclusion. So this is the only very significant relationship we found on supporting terrorism or supporting countering terrorism activities of the police. The other one is education. And also, we as we are expecting, we see that police counterterrorism performance is very significant, and it has a positive impact on supporting police for counterterrorism activities. And this is our force model. Then we added the police legitimacy, perceived police legitimacy. As you can see, indeed adding police legitimacy doesn't improve the model that much. We still have income and education, significant in demographic variables. On the other hand, we see police performance in general crime have disappeared, and counterterrorism performance of police is still significant. And our last model, we added other variables basically into the model, and to understand the effect of other social and political variables on our dependent variable. Basically, in our final model, income is still significant. So it is basically those household incomes who are higher, basically they are supporting more for police on countering terrorism strategies. And counter-terrorism performance is significant. Police performance, police legitimacy, they became insignificant. On the other hand, local performance governments, we added in the last model, it is significant. Cooperation with police, basically it is significant. Those people who are supporting and cooperating with police in general crime, they are also tend to support police in terror-related crimes. Social cohesion, it is a little bit interesting that we have negative relationship between them, but it is a significant relationship. Fear of terrorism, support for terrorism, and media exposure are other significant variables. So what are those mean? Here are our conclusion. First of all, police performance instrumental model seems to be more important and effective in cooperation with police in Turkey. This is a result of a clear reflection of traditional society where police power distances between public administration and civil society is high, which is an example of Turkey. As basically the citizens, they don't entitled to question or participate in exercise of the authority. And again, the data has been collected in 2012, and nowadays you cannot even imagine to question the activities of the authority. With regard to democratic variables, only those whose households income were higher were more likely to cooperate with police when controlling other predictors. This result is basically consistent with several studies which suggest that uneven distribution of wealth was a key factor in determining the quality of law. And basically, those with less wealth were expected to be less likely to cooperate with the police. And ethnicity and religiosity, they have negative relationship with the cooperation. However, when we tested the significance level, basically although they have a negative relationship, they don't have a statistically significant relationship between our dependent variable, which is cooperation with police on terror-related crimes. Interestingly, perceived police legitimacy and police performance in general crime don't have any significant impact on cooperation with police. In order to understand this relationship, we have to go and make a further analysis, which basically should include the context level structures or multi-level analysis. So this is our next plan. The performance of local authorities significantly increased the cooperation with police in terrorism because basically police is an integral part of the political system, and perception about local government is being projected on the police. So when they are happy with the local government, usually they are happy with the police. And if there is a problem with the local government, they are also reflecting that negativity on the police. People who tend to cooperate with police in other general crimes tend to cooperate with police in terror-related crimes. And this is the cohesion level. The level of neighborhood level social cohesion has significant negative impact on cooperation with police. Basically, it is not surprising because on general crime, we see this kind of findings, especially past research reveals that informal social control is higher in neighborhoods where the social cohesion is higher. Residents of those close, tight-knit neighborhoods, basically people tend to solve their problems by themselves. Applying formal control agents is used last resort. So this is a big city. This is Istanbul. People don't know the police working in their neighborhood. Police don't know the neighborhood. So there is a kind of distrust between the parties. And also when we are talking about terrorism, basically we see those problems in especially lower local level economic status neighborhoods. So this is maybe a reason, a justification for this result. And fear of terrorism and level of media exposure are two other variables which have significant impact on supporting terrorism and terror-related crimes. Police with a higher level of fear of crime and media exposure were more likely to cooperate with police when controlling other variables. And also, finally, the respondents asked about their support or sympathy for terrorist groups. We asked two questions and they did get their answers. Their members and their activities. The results indicate that there is a negative significant relationship between two variables. That is controlling other variables. People who have higher numbers in support for terrorism variable tend to less likely to cooperate with police in terror-related crimes. Again, limitations. Basically, this study, the data has been collected in 2012, and since 2012, the social and political structure of the country changed a lot. So there may be a need to collect the new data to test a kind of change in the nature of relation. However, personally, we are not assuming that it changed a lot, because basically, although even in that time, we see that the reflection of traditional power dynasties structure there. People are not allowed to criticize the government, their activities, and they don't basically have a chance to participate in during the policy making process. So this is basically in general picture of our study. If you have any questions, I will be very happy to answer your questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank
That
you.
was awesome. Great. Next up, and just a gentle reminder that, 10 minutes, we have to be kind of firm because we have 4 panelists. Bryce, do you want to take over?
I will. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And it looks like the privilege to share my screen is not up. Could you assign that, please? There we go. Thank you. I'm assuming everybody can see this.
Looks good.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys very much for attending today. And thank you very much to CrimCon for hosting this and allowing us to present our work and showcase it, and hopefully network with some of you and maybe answer any research questions you guys have about our project. In terms of what we'll be presenting today, we'll be focusing on hierarchical dimensions of public safety in the government, specifically in examining performance and determination of confidence in the police. This is a cross-national and multi-level analysis by myself, Bryce, and my colleague over at John Jay, Dr. Hung In Sung. In terms of what we'll be covering today, we'll begin with kind of a brief conceptualization as to what we mean by police legitimacy and really how we have operationalized this within our own work. We'll explore some of the other variables and how they have a relationship with police legitimacy. We'll draw many of those variables from the existing literature. In terms of the study itself, of course, we'll address our research questions and their respective hypotheses. We'll touch on the data we have extracted and our methods, which have employed a hierarchical linear modeling approach, or commonly referred to as HLM. And finally, we'll end with some findings and implications of our study, specifically in examining how we go about defining police legitimacy, confidence in the police within our discipline, and what implications this has for research and policy in terms of reform directed towards developing or maintaining legitimacy in a police force. Kind of exploring a definition as to what we mean by confidence in the police. We take a definition offered by Jackson and Bradford, which states that confidence summarizes a motive-based trust, which is rooted in a social alignment between the police and the community. That very social alignment is founded upon a public assessment of the ability of the police to play the role of a civic guardian. And in playing that role, they look to represent and embody the values of the community being served, and obviously look to secure the respect from the public. If a police force is able to obtain and sustain that level of confidence and legitimacy, this offers many perks, right, in terms of police work. One perk of this would be the encouragement of participation from citizens in both the operation of police services and priority setting, whether it be through investigation, proactive police work, and enforcement. And this also looks to ensure that citizens view the law as being procedurally just, view the police force as being accountable and responsive to their direct needs within society. In terms of how we view confidence in the police from different dimensions, within our modeling approach, we really took variables from both that of public safety and the broader government. Really, we viewed the police as not only being kind of a department or siloed agency, but also kind of an extension of the government being represented. So in both of these models, we have both individual level variables and that of country level variables. In terms of public safety, we started to think about variables in which people may directly observe or citizens may directly observe, whether that be personal or vicarious experiences with crime. And at a more aggregate or country level, we started to explore variables and which represent, I guess, the operation or function of the police force at that level of analysis, whether it be the control of corruption, control of organized crime. In terms of the government performance model within our HLM approach, we also explored individual level predictors, such as that of the citizens' confidence in social institutions, whether it be the media, the church, parliament, the civil service, as well as broader country level variables, whether that be the level of democracy, the rule of law, the growth development per capita, right? These were all measures which were explored in our model. And this table shows each of those measures, both at the individual level and the country level analysis in our HLM method. And of course, we have our public safety model here, which has typically been analyzed as it relates to confidence or legitimacy in the police force, but also a government performance model. And really in constructing these models, what we wanted to learn was, which model helped to explain the most variation and influences on confidence in police across the countries we analyzed. So in gathering these variables, of course, we had to have a strong sample size. And in order to maintain, or I guess, have that strong sample size, we took directly from the World Value Survey, specifically the most recent time frame, that of 2010 and 2014. We also pulled some of the variables from that of the Executive Opinion Survey and the Worldwide Governance Indicators. And in pulling this data, this left us with 55,000 participants, approximately, who were nested within 48 countries, right? To provide that full sample for all of those 18 variables in our analysis. And to your direct right here, you can begin to see that country level breakdown of all 48 countries and those relative sample sizes for each. So in gathering our sample, our very first or preliminary analysis was to really explore those relationships which have typically been identified and analyzed in the previous literature. And as you can see here in this table, we began with our control variables, which have typically been assessed. And then we built in our public safety variables and that of our government's performance variables. And as you can directly tell, all of which maintain the statistical significance level at that 0.05 and even at 0.001 in this case. In terms of the magnitude of the relationship, what we found was that government performance predictors were substantively and overwhelmingly more powerful than that of our public safety variables. So this really raised the question as to which of these variables within their respective models had that greatest influence or effect on the confidence in the police. In the next two slides, I'll present the breakdown of both the government performance variables and that of the public safety variables in our HLM method. In terms of our government performance model, really the main highlights of this were that individual level variables captured within this level of analysis nearly explained 46% of the variance in the confidence of police. And this was compared to a mere 8% being explained at the country level. In understanding which variables capture that variance, what we found is that statistically significant individual variables with that greatest effect size or standardized coefficient included that of confidence in the parliament, confidence in the civil service, and finally confidence in the courts with that greatest impact. It is interesting to note that none of the 4 country level indicators of government performance attained that conventional threshold of statistical significance. So really the main highlight of our government performance model was how people thought of their government, right? Their trust or confidence in social institutions, which really had an impact on their overall confidence in the police force. In terms of the public safety model, although we found results which supported previous research in terms of one feeling secure in their own neighborhood and maybe their personal or vicarious experiences of crime, being important individual level predictors, they didn't hold true to the same, I guess, effect size or impact as that of country level variables, specifically that of organized crime and the control of corruption. So these being significant and meaningful predictors within our model, this really supported the argument that it's not the crime in which the person is directly impacted that has the greatest effect or influence, rather the crime by the powerful, such as organized crime and corruption that has the greatest erosion of public trust in the police force. It is important to note that when we eventually combine both our public safety and government models, as well as our control variables, the effect sizes and significance levels remain consistent across. So that is important to note. In terms of putting this all together, right, what does this mean for both our discipline and policy going forward? This really reinforces the idea that police themselves are not autonomous state agents. This idea being that police are constrained by the political regime, governance, and socioeconomic structures of the society in which they operate. And obviously this has direct impacts on any type of policy or policy or procedural reform aimed directly at the police, right, and developing the confidence, legitimacy of the police force. So really a main takeaway of this implication of this paper and project is that if we look to make the police more legitimate, as well as a more effective agency, we have to look to the broader extensions, whether that be the government, the social institutions, and how people are viewing them within their own countries or cities, or even at a more local level. This idea being that confidence in the police is inseparable from confidence in other branches and functions of government. Furthermore, that socio-political contexts provide both the symbols and meanings of police work that really shape the possibilities for their own reform. And obviously there's quite a few movements towards police reform, whether it be in Latin America, in Hong Kong. So this is really important to note and think about as far as how we go about as a discipline and even as policymakers in terms of where we aim our resources and funding in reforming government to increase that confidence and legitimacy of the state. We thank you very much for, of course, attending today. And please feel free to reach out via email, on ResearchGate or Twitter if you have any questions or comments. And we'll be sticking around after the conclusion of today's panel to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was great. And next up, we have Megan, Jonathan, and Amy. Welcome. And I have promoted Jonathan, at least I have agency because he was as an attendee. So take it away.
Could you promote me instead, please? Let's move the slides.
No, you're already promoted. You're already awesome. Jonathan attended the group and was like, I don't see anything. So yeah, so you, Jonathan, and Megan, you can share whatever it is you want to share.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks.
Take it away.
Oh. Okay, hi, my name's Amy Humphrey. I'm here with my colleagues, John and Megan. We're from the University of Dundee. I'm just going to be talking about some of the results from our Nordforsk funded project in the UK, Norway and Finland on police legitimacy, legitimacy and accountability of online state surveillance. So a little bit of context for what I'm going to present today. Western democracies are using ever more sophisticated methods to monitor online communications in the name of state security. And the UK has complex systems to control who can see this, how it's gathered and stored and analysed. This is too vast to be monitored by human eyes alone, so automated systems and algorithms are used to filter the material, and some of it may later be viewed by particular specialist agents. And so far from a homogeneous state, these agents also sit across diverse agencies and jurisdictions. So today, I'm going to draw on findings from a survey and from in-depth interviews with students and staff in UK higher education, and also some surveys in Norway and Finland that match the survey in the UK, to illustrate some of the ways that state online surveillance can be broken down into its components by those who it seeks to observe, and how this might make surveillance seem more acceptable, and how taking apart surveillance in this way can allow novel engagements with it. Okay. So surveillance studies then have conceptualized the ways in which humans are taken apart by these acts of observation. Hall and Mendel note, and it's shown in the quote there, that the subject's partitioned into bits and bytes which become undulatory in orbit in a continuous network. And then moving to surveillance of borders, for example, Moore and Hall in 2009 proposed that the visualization of bodies into component parts through screening technologies, can be a digital dissection of bodies into component parts as part of a move to control society. And then concerned with more commercial actors, Zuboff warns that surveillance capitalism feeds on every aspect of every human. Although we'd say perhaps that state actors, in contrast to these companies that Zuboff focuses on, would claim to accumulate knowledge both from us and for us. So we're moving beyond that. We're switching the gaze beyond how digital surveillance can break individual subjects into data traces. What we're interested in is how the subjects of these surveillance take the state apart and its surveillance into its components. And we found significant distinctions are made between algorithmic automation, levels of human involvement, and significant variance depending on which actors are perceived as feeding on our respondents' experience. Okay, so perhaps the first and perhaps the most novel of our findings from the survey is that across all our case study areas combined and individual countries, so the UK, within Finland and within Norway, and also regardless of whether it's a student or staff member, and regardless of gender, there is a significant difference between concern about machine filtering and about human interaction with personal communications. And secondary to that, there's a consistent point where degree of human interaction becomes more problematic. So these results come from a scenario-based question which asks for responses on a 7-point Likert scale regarding how comfortable the respondent is with different levels of interaction with a personal email, which is intercepted by an undefined state agency. Sign ranks tests were performed on each consecutive pair on the scales. So the levels were auto-filtering to discount the relevance of the email, a human examining the metadata, a human skim reading the content for specific words and phrases, a human properly reading the content, and a human reading the content and doing background checks. So each stage results in a decrease in comfort compared to the one before, but only 2 of these stages are significant, as shown on the slide. So first, as I said before, between machine eyes and human eyes, where there's a drop in the median score from 5 to 3, and that's significant to 0.001. And then again, between a human skim reading and then a human paying attention to the content, again, significant to the same level. Okay, and so this kind of relationship's not been explored in surveillance studies before. So it's quite a new kind of understanding of how the public might perceive this kind of treatment of their personal data. But there are some caveats to it. So these clear results across all our case study areas about non-human eyes on their data are important, but there's important context. Firstly, the scenario centered around a rare though critical event. It was based on a terror attack and the prevention of that. And insights from our interviews and more in-depth studies showed that although participants might be concerned about surveillance, they also tend not to believe that it's at all likely they would ever actually be subject to it. So it's a bit of an abstract kind of scenario for them to be considering. But it's also important that very few of our respondents felt they had any sufficient understanding of surveillance or the technology to say much about it. So though significant, it might not actually represent an informed preference which is important, which has important policy implications for later. Okay, moving away from this distinction, I want to say a little bit as well about the different state actors and how people perceive these. Okay, so it also mattered to our participants which state actors were involved in state surveillance, so police, intelligence agencies, or politicians, and views on trust, competency, and oversight changed into relation to each of these. So, for example, roughly half trusted the police more than intelligence agencies, and you can see that in the quote by participant 15 here. This mostly related back to the police's connection with the community, whereas the intelligence agencies were seen as more secretive, more abstract, less connected to the public good. Although intelligence agencies, conversely, were generally seen as more competent in the field. So there's two kind of types of trust. There was trust in kind of fairness and good treatment, in doing the right thing, and then trust in competency. And then some significant events also coloured these perceptions. For example, as participant 12 talks about here, the undercover policing scandal that we had in the UK, where, and this was not online surveillance, this was in real life surveillance. We had undercover officers infiltrating protest groups and having relationships with women. So that came up a few times as well, and impacted how they would trust the police to do online surveillance. Okay. Also important to our participants was the country of origin of where the surveillance was coming from. So although concern for authorities in general is lower than that for criminal or commercial actors, concern about surveillance from foreign authorities is significantly higher than for concern about authorities based in the UK. And perceptions about the surveillance regimes in key countries influence this. So this comes from the interviews, slightly more in depth kind of understanding. So for example, in the USA, about the USA, the scandal, the Snowden revelations came up quite a bit in our interviews as something that made them a little bit more wary of foreign involvement. Okay, and so to conclude then, our results challenge previous work that focuses on these individual actors as objects of state surveillance, and we start to show how the gaze works in both directions, how the state can also be taken apart. So rather than seeing state surveillance as a stable whole, our participants are taking this assemblage apart into its parts. And each of these kind of motivate differing responses. The findings related to machine eyes compared to human eyes is a novel contribution to this field, but really needs to be treated with interpretive caution because of the way the questions were framed and our other findings from the survey, which show this reduced knowledge about what's actually going on. So in terms of policy implications, these findings could suggest ways for states to make surveillance appear more acceptable, particularly where surveillance is perhaps really important, although it's quite, it might also, on the flip side, provide an argument that privacy campaigners might want to shift the focus of their campaigns a little bit more or pay more attention to the impacts of abstract machine surveillance. Okay, thank you very much. I think I'll finish there.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
That was awesome. Thank you. Okay, Ryan, you're up.
Good morning. My name is Ryan Mason, and I am a second-year master's student in the Security Studies program at Liverpool John Moores University. I'll probably go ahead and turn my camera off for the duration of the presentation, just to conserve some bandwidth as I share my screen. Can everybody see that all right?
Perfect.
So do digital policemen dream of broken screens? That title is a nod to the famous Philip K. Dick novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, the precursor to the movie Blade Runner. So has property crime really declined? What you're seeing represented on the chart is a snippet from a report from the Bureau of Justice Statistics, which is representative of common wisdom that crime has been falling for several decades now. However, a quote by Ross Anderson of Cambridge University typifies my argument central to the presentation. The claim by police forces and government officials that crime was falling overall was wrong. Physical crime was falling while online crime was rising. And Anderson was prompted by the restating of UK government crime statistics going back to 2012 that took into account digital victimization. In the UK, Anderson et al. Found that when crime victimization surveys were evaluated for 2018, approximately half of all property crime is internet online based. There's no reason to think that the situation in the US is much different. In attempting to quantify the economic impacts of cybercrime, Anderson et al. Categorized a wide variety of computer crimes that range from email-based schemes, advanced fee fraud, business email compromise, to phishing schemes, ransomware, romance schemes, etc. And although and they revisited these activities for 2019, and although that the majority of, or that many of the various schemes were different, the majority of the criminal activities that were evaluated were on the rise, and with costs that were in the billion-dollar range for many of the categories. As online activity has transitioned from fixed to mobile devices, and the increase of social media, it's made it much easier to reach victims. And as researcher Stephen Cobb has pointed out, the metrics for cybercrime, really have much to be desired. The NIBRS or UCR statistics really don't capture anything but individual victimizations and almost nothing to do with cybercrime, leaving businesses aside entirely. And the NCVS only captures identity theft. But when you look at identity theft alone, it costs Americans $17 billion, possibly more than all the losses due to household burglary, motor vehicle theft, and other property theft combined. So we are in a period that Third Way, a NGO in the United States that looks at various national security issues, defines as a digital crime wave. As Mike Oyang of Third Way has found, 1% of cyber criminals are arrested, which translates into only 3 arrests per 1,000 of crimes reported, cybercrime incidents reported, versus 18% for all other property crime and 46% for violent crime. Third Way also found that, according to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, that it only based 9 cases on Internet Crime Complaint Center data, even though they received 298,728 complaints in fiscal year 16. And oh, by the way, none of these complaints is located in the NIBRS data. For example, the United States Secret Service, which is nominally in charge of protecting the integrity of the US financial system, also only brought 251 cybercrime cases in 2016. A special agent Matt O'Neill, who is the director of the Secret Service Global Investigation Center, I think he put it best. Somebody said one time, before you take us cybersecurity professionals too seriously, understand that we are the Chicago Cubs or the losing team. And he goes on to posit that he can't even say that anymore because the Chicago Cubs are good. COVID-19 has accelerated this trend. And depicted on the screen, you see a New Yorker cartoon that came out not soon after the lockdowns started throughout the globe. This transition to cybercrime was pretty swift. COVID-19 has accelerated many of these societal trends that were already in motion before the pandemic, including cybercrime. In May of 2020, the FTC, which is the US Federal Trade Commission, saw the most online shopping complaints in 1 month time period that it has ever had, with over 2,500 in that month alone. The Internet Crime Complaint Center is also seeing a record number of complaints involving consumer purchases, ranging from spoofed websites to scams regarding, related to the pandemic, such as masks, ransomware, and other criminal schemes. And they've also been hitting vital industries such as the healthcare sector. Additionally, state governments have been subject to massive digitally enabled fraud surrounding their unemployment systems. And in Oregon, this has totaled more than $100 million. So even with the changes to the current operating environment, much of what constitutes law enforcement activity is still based on the Peelian policing paradigm in the UK and the broken windows, or its successor model of problem-oriented policing in the United States. The Peelian policing model being defined by David Wall of Durham University as the bureaucratically organized agency formed locally but partially funded by the central government to keep dangerous classes off the streets and maintain order and enforce law. This model, of course, was designed to help police traditionally deploy law enforcement resources with help of technologies such as radio cars, going back to the 1940s, crime mapping, and now with sophisticated predictive policing models such as CompSat and PredPol. However, none of these technologies were designed to evolve with what Stephen Cobb refers to as crimes against governments and businesses that are not specifically spatial in a way that is linked to a local police jurisdiction, such as cybercrime. Police forces are also generally conservative institutions. And one of the ways, that are often slow to adapt, and one of the ways that police organizations seek to react to new threats without having to change their conduct of the whole organization is to create specialized units, which really do tend to corral expertise. One of the earliest ways that police reacted to cyber criminality was the development of task forces in the United States to deal with child pornography. Ever since the days of the crackle of the dial-up modem that would bring American consumers to internet services such as AOL, Prodigy, and CompuServe, really individuals have sought to exploit children online. In the United States, in 1998, the Justice Department created a hybrid local federal task forces called the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Forces, or ICACs. This was really the first foray into policing online behavior at scale. And really, the ICACs were very adept at molding their techniques to the various technological challenges that range from the early chat rooms to the rise of bulletin boards, to websites trafficking in indecent images, and the peer-to-peer file sharing of the 2000s. However, for various reasons, this adaptive spirit was not transferred over to other crimes. The siloed nature of this expertise really appears to be impacting enforcement, as noted by several researchers in the United States that looked at cybercrime enforcement in the state of North Carolina. And almost half the respondents had no opinion as to whether or not cybercrime was being taken seriously. There are a number of possible steps that can be taken to improve law enforcement capacity on cybercrime. It is a top tier priority in the United States and the UK. However, it appears still that cybercrime does not generate the same budgetary consideration as other priorities such as counterterrorism. There's a tremendous amount of discussion how to increase cooperation in international cooperation with cybercrime due to the borderless nature of it. But what does this say about the fact that local law enforcement make up the bulk of law enforcement agencies in the United States? What if the money would be better spent recruiting, hiring, and training a different type of police officer that focused on digital investigation? My research has focused on looking at law enforcement training in the United States. And I looked at every state in the United States, and for states in which I was able to obtain a full peace officer basic training curriculum with the hours allotted, 22 states have no mandatory cybercrime training block. 6 states had 1 hour. 5 had 2 hours. 1 state had 4. 1 state had 7. And only 1 state had a block that was variable between 1 and 8 hours. The lack of inclusion of cybercrime in the foundational course for policing really does set a tone from the beginning that cybercrimes are neither routine nor particularly important. And this research has been replicated in the UK as well, and with similar results. In the New York City, there was a pilot program designed to challenge this notion that digital crime was too technical and too international for local police to investigate. An application was deployed for a police officer to capture the right interview details for detectives. And instead of overseas scammers, they're really finding that a whole lot of this is, quote, the result of some knuckleheads from the Bronx. Lastly, to quote director of cybercrime for the NYPD, if someone hit me over the head and took $1,000 out of my wallet, you would have 5 cops running to find the guy. But if they come in and say some scammer took $1,000 from me, ooh, you got to call the FBI. That's crazy. That's really an old school way of thinking. Being that cybercrime is one of the fastest evolving threats faced by law enforcement, in order to counter this threat, local law enforcement should be trained and deployed to investigate more cases at a lower level of cybercrime. This approach could improve both public reporting statistics by increasing confidence in the public that these types of crimes will be investigated with suitable outcomes for victims. And society can clearly no longer rely on a few premier law enforcement agencies to investigate cybercrime cases alone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think, Ryan, you have a question from Mackenzie in the Q&A.
Okay. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of trouble pulling back up Zoom.
I ended your share. I hope that worked.
So the question is, I was wondering, based on what broken windows theory outlines in conjunctions with the use of technology. Do you think the reliance on technology with trying to control the influx of crime has pushed other criminological theories like social bonds to the back bumper to deter or prevent the continuance of cybercrime or in person? That's really interesting. You know, and I was really focusing on this talk in the best way you can in 10 minutes to try to outline the fact that our, at least in the United States, common understanding of cybercrime or of broken windows theory, you know, really tends to focus on low-level crimes that are committed in the physical world. And I was thinking in the back of my mind, really looking at you know, the relationship between police officers and routine policing in minority neighborhoods of color, where they are routinely drawn there by systems like PredPol and other systems, but it really doesn't capture, right, encapsulate over a third of potentially criminal activity. So, you know, you're sent to these communities and saying, this is where the crime is, and getting the same outcomes again and again for crime rates and crime statistics. That is interesting, bringing up social bonds theory. I am sure, and I didn't look at it myself too in depth, but you know, there are a variety of criminological theories that I think are native to online offending. But I was really, you know, I was really looking at a blended model of both cyber crimes that were native and cyber crimes that were cyber enabled. And you know, I really, you know, honestly didn't necessarily look at you know, offender topologies to that extent, or how they're used by law enforcement. But being that broken windows is in fact the de facto law enforcement theory for how crime operates in major cities, at least in the United States, that's where I decided to spend the majority of my thinking. So.
Thank you, everyone. I am really in awe of all your presentations and all your research. It's been such a great learning experience. Thank you so much for taking part in our first ever CrimCon. It's just been going so great. And the CrimCon board is just really appreciative of all your support. For the incoming presenters, I'm going to close down Zoom and I'll reopen it so that we can start a fresh recording. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend. And I hope to be able to meet y'all in person at some point.
Thank you, Joan.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks very much.
Thanks. Bye.